Japanese Americans by Mason and Adin.
On December 7, 1941, the Empire of Japan launched an attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. In the following months, hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans were rounded up and sent to internment camps under suspicion of disloyalty to the United States. But the feelings that paved the road to internment began long before the attack. For more than 80 years, Asian immigrants were viewed as economic threats, spurring various laws that effectively banned them from the country. For those who made it to America, the lingering resentment culminated after Pearl Harbor. Motivated by vocal outcries from politicians and military officials, FDR signed Executive Order 9066, empowering the U.S. Army to designate areas from which any or all persons may be excluded. He later formed the War Relocation Authority to establish 10 permanent camps, housing nearly 120,000 Japanese Americans, mostly from the western United States. 2/3 of those interned were native-born American citizens. With only 6 days to dispose of their possessions, residents were forced to sell their belongings and even their homes for small sums of money. Internment camps were often situated in isolated deserts, prone to harsh weather, and surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. Within the barracks, internees lived in small one-room apartments with little privacy and constant surveillance.
The struggle of Japanese Americans are that they were put in camps and separated from their families. Another struggle is that they were called Japs by almost everyone in America. Japanese Americans endured many hardships, segregation, and difficulty securing good jobs. They were excluded from domestic work, gardening, as well as all unions. American citizens marrying aliens lost their citizenship. When the Army forced Japanese Americans into concentration camps during World War II, Fred Cormascu refused to comply with the orders. He was arrested and held in Presidio Stockade until being sent to the camps. Fred Cormascu fought his conviction and intimate with his case, making it to the U.S. Supreme Court. Another leader was Yuri Kochiyama. Yuri Kochiyama was a Japanese American political and civil rights activist during World War II, and the U.S. government forcibly removed her and her family to her incarceration site for Japanese Americans. For 50 years, Kochiyama spoke out about oppressive institutions and injustice in the United States.
After the war, Japanese Americans fought for stronger legal protections, voting and citizenship rights. Important court cases like Korimatsu v. United States helped show that it was wrong to treat people unfairly because of their race. Later, these cases helped protect everyone's rights under the Constitution. In Oyama versus California, the Supreme Court stopped unfair laws that said Japanese Americans couldn't own land. Then, in 1952, the McCarran-Walter Act allowed Japanese immigrants to become U.S. citizens for the first time. After World War II, Japanese Americans were no longer blocked from certain jobs. They were finally able to work in many professions and businesses, which helped them and their families have better lives. Finally, in 1988, Japanese Americans won reparations for their internment during World War II. The U.S. government passed the Civil Liberties Acts. This law gave an official apology and money to Japanese Americans who had been sent to camps during World War II. It was a way to admit the government had treated them unfairly and to show respect for their struggles.
We gather here today to right a grave wrong. More than 40 years ago, shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry living in the United States were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in makeshift internment camps. This action was taken without trial, without jury. It was based solely on race, for these 120,000 were Americans of Japanese descent. The legislation that I am about to sign provides for a restitution payment to each of the 60,000 survivors. Yet no payment can make up for those lost years. So what is most important in this bill has less to do with property than with honor. For here we admit a wrong. Here we reaffirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law.
Eventually, 82,000 Japanese Americans received a presidential apology and a $20,000 payment.
The changes Japanese Americans had on us were the flow of Japanese animations, fashion, films, martial arts, television shows, and video games to the United States has increased American awareness of Japanese pop culture, which has significant influence on American pop culture, including sequel media and entertainment into the 21st century.
The video game industry is one way that changed how we live our lives in American society. A man named Shigeru Miyamoto is known as the father of modern video gaming. He helped create famous games like Super Mario and The Legend of Zelda. Also, maybe Kirby, yeah. These games became very popular and helped video games become a part of entertainment for families everywhere. Medical innovations is another way Japanese Americans changed society. Dr. Michio Kaku is a scientist who studies the universe and how technology might change our future. His work helps us understand science and imagine new inventions. Agriculture is another way that Japanese Americans changed our lives. Japanese Americans farmers use smart farming techniques to grow crops more quickly and successfully. Their ideas helped to turn California into one of the best places in the world for growing food. How did Nintendo begin to be popular in America? Nintendo is a renowned Japanese video game company. It became popular in America when they launched Nintendo North America in 1985. Video games had fallen out of popularity in the U.S. because the games were boring. It became popular in the U.S. again in 1985 because Nintendo launched better games, for example, Mario and Donkey Kong. Americans got excited again about video games and Nintendo grew into a big company. They launched Nintendo 64 with more games in the 1990s like Zelda and Super Mario 64. Even though it was a Japanese company, it inspired a lot of American companies to get involved in the in the video game industry.
The lives of Japanese Americans living in Hawaii and along the West Coast changed following the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. But Japanese Americans in Hawaii lived under significantly other circumstances than those on the mainland. Some factors played important roles in preventing internment in Hawaii. First, General George C. Marshall, the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, informed General John J. DeWitt of the Army's West Coast commander that a mass evacuation of citizens and aliens from Hawaii might impose shipping demands that would damage the urgent war effort by diverting men and materials. Japanese game designer Satoshi Tajiri created the Pokemon game in 1996. The recently introduced Nintendo Game Boy portable console concept arose from his childhood hobby of collecting insects, as well as his love for anime or Japanese animation. Jerry saw the Game Boy as an ideal platform because of its communication cable enable players to connect their consoles and play together. Also, the pocket-sized device allows busy Japanese school children to play the games in the short breaks between their classes.
We are on our Google tour now.
We are going to start off in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, due to this is where the Empire of Japan attacked the USA, and this is why the Japanese Americans were put into internment camps. Next, we are going to go to Crystal City, which is one of the camps to where Japanese Americans were located into, and from what I've researched, was actually one of the most, was a camp where some of the most dangerous were suspected to be some of the most dangerous Japanese Americans in America were. Manzavar was also another Japanese American camp where more than 120,000 Japanese Americans were kept in World War II, 1942 to 1945. The Poston, Arizona was also another place where Japanese Americans were kept due to the attacks on Pearl Harbor. Ellis Island, it was first used for immigration in the 17 and 1600s, but during World War II, Japanese Americans along the East Coast were kept on Ellis Island. Amachi Museum is actually, from what I've learned, a museum based off, showcasing the struggles that Japanese Americans had to go through during World War II, and it was also a location of another Japanese American internment camp.
And that includes our presentation. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.